June 27th, 2024, 11:30 hours. Costello wakes up alone. He got in just after 4 a.m. He swore becoming a distributor would tame his late nights, but even after hanging up his shakers and leather apron, he realized he was organically nocturnal. He readies himself a pour-over with an Ethiopian bean from a roaster in New Hampshire. His nostalgia for his hometown was almost nauseating at times. He usually had ramen or Peruvian food after drinking, so he rarely ate upon waking. He played back the message from Delilah to remind himself the name of the series she insisted he watch. Delilah is at Doll Scars, his latest social media fling. He knows 3 things about her. She loves 80s goth music. She shoots 35mm film photography. She claims to be single. Other than that, he couldn't draw any other intel from hours of stalking her profile. For all he knows, she could be Reiko from Bulgaria catfishing the fuck out of him. Either way, he's watching the show. The series occurring in Seattle was a reminder of Jenna. Costello had spoken with Jenna's mom a few dozen times since she returned to Seattle in 2017. During a dark period, he went radio silent with the family, but came around after getting himself to a healthier place. In 2021, he learned she was regaining memory from living in Los Angeles, but never did recall Costello. He wanted to let it go, but couldn't get the image of her smile out of his head. Just after spending nearly 2 months in his apartment in 2017, he traveled to Seattle for a Spirit Distribution Expo. His supervisor, Ben, was a kind soul and understood Costello's situation after Jenna was shot. He went and saw Costello a few weeks before the expo was scheduled. Ben explained to Costello they had temporarily filled his position while he was off, hoping he would return after a few weeks. After the first full month, Ben began to realize the position may need to be permanently filled while Costello exhausted his leave time. Costello was highly valued, but reality was settling in at work. Ben asked Costello if he could gather himself over the next few weeks, attend the expo, and return to work. Costello agreed. Fortunately, Ben's faith in Costello got him back to work, back to socializing, and now getting ready to watch a documentary his social media crush turned him on to. Episode 1. An ominous introduction jumps squarely into a litany of dark theories of the deaths of Tal Miramontes and his girlfriend Spencer Culbertson. Spencer was unknown to anyone in Tal's ecosystem. Taliberto Miramontes was a glassblower from Kansas City, Missouri, who met Spencer at a pitch for a glassware contract in Olympia in 2014. Spencer was the assistant to an events coordinator who became incessantly fond of Tal's craftsmanship with tumblers, pilsners, and any other untouchable glassware that could be showcased at events in Washington. She was also a bit of a wayward pagan who kept her relationship with Tal quiet until they were both found inside a velvet-lined chest above the garage of her studio. Spencer did everything she could to keep her relationship with Tal to herself, as did Tal. Email correspondence detailed 3 years of a relationship locked up so tight, it took their deaths to unveil the secret. This created fodder for conspiracies about their deaths so wild, even YouTubers tilted their heads at the nonsense. The macabre behind these theories was the only thing propping up an open investigation. Seattle investigators began waving white flags long before there ever was a theory about Tal submitting to self-immolation with Spencer as a sacrifice. They were found with a lighter and bottle of alcohol, though there was the obvious evidence of them being locked into the chest by someone else. Tal had a fatal blow to the back of his head and blunt trauma to his wrists and ankles consistent with a tire iron. His bones were broken in these locations, allowing his hands and feet to contort so his larger body would fit inside of the chest. Tal also had bones shattered so badly to his arm, the only conclusion was he had been run over by a vehicle. According to the autopsy, Spencer's liver was lacerated with a double-edged dagger. The coroner's report detailed scar tissue near the wound that appeared to be from previous penetration, multiple times. Spencer told everyone she knew that her death would come at her own hands before anyone could ever take her life from her. Self-immolation was nearly a bucket list bullet point. Every person interviewed after the murder told investigators Spencer fantasized about an opportunity to rip the power of death away from someone by lighting herself on fire and watching the horror as they witnessed her self-sacrifice. She enchanted Tal with her dark, spectral bravado, but failed to get into the details of her grisly underworld. She beguiled Tal just enough to lure him into a multi-year affair that consisted of sexual and spiritual experiences he wasn't getting from his wife back in Kansas City. The time they spent together was complex, but paled in comparison to her personal affairs while Tal was home with his family. The pain she inflicted on men went unreported because each one's congregation, university students, or devoted families would have had a hard time understanding their escape from dogmatic faith, a marital oath, or their contractually binding ethics for a glimpse into pagan ritual, simply for some dark copulation with Spencer Culbertson. Episode 2. Taliberto Miramontes made the most beautiful, yet primitive, glassware anyone had ever seen. A migrant from Jalisco, Mexico, he learned how to blow glass from his uncle, a gaffer from Colima whose patience and will to survive brought him the ability to fine-tune temperature and timing, bringing to Mexico the finest vasos, chupitos, y copas de vino. Tal grew up on an agave farm with dreams of sending the finest tequila to the United States. Instead, his uncle showed him how to provide a service for the cartel, rather than a tax. Tal carried on the family's trade of providing glassware for the cartel to drink the tequila they were vigorously taxing upon the agave farmers. In 2006, Tal flew into Dallas, Texas with his wife Mariana. They traveled on transit visas with destinations en route to Canada. During a 23-hour layover in Dallas, they were picked up by an awaiting 14-seat van with 6 other unknown migrants and driven to Kansas City. 8 years later, they both received permanent visas and made their home in the United States. Tal worked every day labor job he could find to stay afloat while saving for glassblowing equipment. He was rusty after the time away from his artistry as a gaffer, but before he knew it, he was back crafting top-shelf glassware. Glassware so good he became a coveted contact for Americans in search of the crudely hand-blown, yet somehow most beautifully tinted and intriguing glassware anyone had ever seen. In 2013, Spencer was in Kansas City meeting a flatware distributor when she saw Tal's glasses in a mezcal bar. She snapped photos with her phone and asked the bartender for the name of the glassware distributor. The bartender was hesitant, knowing Tal hadn't obtained permanent visa status. So he took Spencer's contact information and played it safe. He coordinated the contact with Tal himself and gave him Spencer's information, telling him she claimed to work for a highly reputable and well-paying events coordinator in Washington who saw the photos of the glasses and insisted on a meeting. She made no mention of her surreptitious pagan abyss that would make a man hand over his eyes and then ask why he did such a thing. Episode 3. The Miramontes family did everything they could to avoid conflict with the cartel while living between Jalisco and Colima. Tal's father did everything to never expose his family's agave farmland to the United States. Sure, Tal's uncle told him this was to avoid paying taxes to the cartels. Truth was, the real reason they did everything to keep them from snooping around was the family's escape from Catholicism and their practices in Mexican paganism. Once the Kansas City mezcal barkeep finally reached out to Tal with Spencer's details, Tal called her the moment his permanent visa status was confirmed. A meeting in Olympia was scheduled and he flew in to meet her and her boss at the first opportunity. Tal's glassware sold itself, and he knew it would, so he found himself taking in Spencer's image. Her alabaster skin, naturally black hair, sharp blue eyes, and clearly visible pagan tattoos that rushed him back in time to his youth in Mexico. After securing a contract with the events firm, he and Spencer celebrated at the hotel bar. Not a soul had a single detail about where they wound up after the hotel bar that night. However, once investigators began to dig in, piles of email correspondence, text messages, and travel expenses laid out the next 3 years of their relationship, pulling back the curtains into their very dark pagan sexual affair, allowing the sunlight to shine upon the secrets that preceded their very cryptic demise. One lonely clip of surveillance footage was revealed during the investigation. A credit card swipe from Spencer's American Express was found at a liquor store in Seattle. Only speculation can tell us what Tal was carrying inside of the brown paper bag as they left the store. The clerk recalls ringing up a bottle of wine, a bottle of Fernet, and a pack of clove cigarettes, but a full-size bag could certainly contain many more items. Unfortunately, the clerk was so involved in the Oklahoma City basketball game, he was not only unable to help provide additional details about their purchase, he was also oblivious to the man standing in front of the store who appeared to be worshiping a mural painted on the storefront, either worshiping or having some sort of manic breakdown. A male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing a dark zip-up hoodie, shorts, low-top tennis shoes, and a t-shirt with an indistinguishable image captivated investigators for 2.5 minutes before following Tal and Spencer away from the store. This unknown man presented an odd performance that was studied by various religious groups, pagans, yoga masters, you name it. In the end, nothing was found to explain what he was doing and if it had anything to do with the deaths of Tal Miramontes and Spencer Culbertson. Facing a mural of a man and woman dancing on the storefront of Hellas Liquor, this unknown man pressed his hands against the wall and then reached for the sky, pressing his palms together. He held this position for 30 seconds before turning to his left and bringing his hands, still palms pressed together, down to his belly. He held this position before making another pivot to his left, now facing the camera. Unfortunately, he dropped his head as he lowered his hands down to his side, giving investigators no look at his face. Another pivot left, bringing his hands together, palms pressed, up to his belly. He held this position for 30 more seconds before finally facing the mural one last time for the final 30 seconds. This time his hands hung down by his side. Tal and Spencer walked from the store right at this moment and appeared to care less about the man facing the wall. They also didn't seem to care as he followed them away.